Hi, this is John again, the owner and developer of VectorDecks. In the next set of tutorials, we're going to go over the next grouping of rail objects that are in VectorDecks use object information, and that is the different rail components themselves. As you see here, I have this template I made to help me when I create new objects and placing them in their proper locations and getting their proper dimensions. For a more complete description of how I use this document, how I brought in this particular PDF and scaled it to create all these different objects, please go back to my Create Your Custom Objects Basics tutorial where I go into this in great detail. Now I'm going to start out with the top rail. Go ahead and select that and copy it. And go into that document that we're working on that's blanked out. I'm going to do a paste and move that object again to its dead center point. It's going to help when we create this symbol. Now this object, the top rail and the bottom rail, are 2D objects. They'll be extruded along a particular path that VectorDeck defines. So we want to make sure that these objects plane is a screen plane, so make sure it's set to screen. Now we're ready to go ahead and navigate down to that VectorDecks data folder, and this is rail objects, so we're going to work with the rail objects involved here, and it happens to be a top rail, so double click on that top rail, and here we just have 3, but we're going to go ahead and duplicate one of these and replace it with this particular item. So I'm looking for a top rail that most defines this one. It's kind of hard to see here, so I'm going to go ahead and use the number 1. I'm going to right click and duplicate. Let's rename this. Let's leave it as top rail number 2 for now. Again, you can name this whatever you want, but this tutorial we'll just go with top rail number 2. Now we need to go in here and edit and replace it with this one. So let's first select this object, copy it, and select that top rail number 2. I'm right clicking and select edit. Now it's a 2D object, so by default 2D was selected, and this is the existing object that we're going to go ahead and replace. But if you notice here, unlike the post objects, the actual object itself is not the exact center of the entire object. It's just the top center of the object, and then it's centered right and left. So it's important to note that before you delete this. So I'm going to go ahead and delete this. See, now if we paste in place, like we've done in some of the other tutorials, it's not pasted properly. It needs to have this top middle centered on that 0 point. So go ahead and let's move it to there. Go ahead and select that and let it snap to there. So now we have it in the proper location. Next, before we exit out of here, we need to go to its records file. So you're going to go to the object information and click on data, and these 2 dimensions appear in this records format. So we need to make sure these are the correct dimensions, the width and the depth. So let's go back to that template where we had the object originally, and I show good cross section here. Let's get closer. You see here the top shows the width is actually being 2 7/8 and the depth 3 inches. Now we can go back to that symbol edit mode. We're still in here in the other document, and go ahead and select that width, and we need to change it to 2 7/8, and then the depth is 3 inches. So now we're entering the correct information. VectorDecks needs to know this information because it's going to utilize it in a lot of different calculations to place the rail. So looks like we're good to go. Go ahead and exit, and you'll see over here now we have that rail number 2 and its dimensions and everything are correct. Now before we go to that bottom rail, let's go ahead and save this template again and delete that. Do a save as template. Again, we're using number 10. Replace. Now let's go back and let's select that bottom rail. Let's see, it's over here. Copy. And let's go back to our working blank. Go ahead and do a paste. Let's go ahead and center that object like we did before. Let's put that center right where it needs to be. Alright. Now we need to navigate to its proper folder. We were working in that top rails folder. We need to go to the bottom rails. So you can click on this and you'll see here the rail bottom rails. Select it. And just like the top rails, we only had a few. I'm going to go ahead and use this bottom rail number 1. Duplicate it and we'll leave that number 2. Now we need to get in there and edit and replace it with this. So let's first select this, do a copy. Now we're gonna right click on this, edit. Again, the bottom rail needs to be located just like that top rail. It needs to be centered right and left, but it also needs to be centered only at the top. So again, it's important to like kind of observe things before you delete them, because you're replacing the new object pretty much in the exact position as the existing one. So let's go ahead and delete this, and then we'll do that paste as, or paste in place. Now we need to move things around here a little bit because we need to make sure that the center here is centered with the top. And now we're ready to check its record. So go over here and select the object's information palette, and your data needs to be selected. And as within the top rail, there's only 2 dimensions here that you need to enter, but they're very important that you enter it and you enter it correctly. So I'm going to go back over here to the template we were working on and zoom in on this bottom rail. And the bottom rail, here's a good example too. The bottom rail has this little niche to it. This is a little higher. You know, the overall dimension is 2 1/4, but the actual height of it to where the rail will set is 2 1/8, and this is the more critical dimension you need. So we need to have the depth at 2 1/8 and the width at 2 1/2. Now let's go back to that symbol, and let's go ahead and change that width to 2 1/2 and its depth to 2 1/8. Now the previous rail, it looks like that previous rail we were working on was also 2 1/8, so we're good to go here. We don't have to change anything. Everything else could be left alone. It won't have any effect on the object. Now we can go ahead and exit. And now let's go ahead and save that as a template again, so we don't lose any of these new rails that we made. So again, select Save As, and select that working one, and hit Replace. Now, our next tutorial, we're going to cover balusters, and that's a 3-dimensional object. So I'm going to cover that in my next tutorial.